Mark Sumner, he goes by DevilsTower on Daily Kos, wrote a really interesting diary there called How Republicans Killed Capitalism. I wanted to bring him on and talk about that. Mark, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hi, thanks. Happy to be here.
Mark, let's go to the heart of your premise. How did Republicans kill capitalism?
Well, they're kind of loving capitalism to death. We buy into the premise nowadays that free trade is somehow an intrinsic American value. We forget that during Washington's very first term, the government was involved in selectively restricting imports, paying out subsidies, bailing out the debts of states, creating private companies, being the major stockholder in a bank, going in debt to become the major stockholder in a bank, and carrying out a stimulus plan of infrastructure projects, and all of that paid for by new taxes. But nowadays, we seem to have developed an allergy to all of that. We've morphed into this state where we believe that pure free trade is an unalloyed good, and even Democrats seem to buy into that.
Well, is it that they think that they actually believe that, or is it that their corporate overlords are saying, oh yeah, push for that, because that allows them to have free reign to make money in the short term, and then who cares if they crash their companies? They don't own their companies.
Well, sure. It is definitely a heavy-duty short-term thinking. And in essence, what we've done is kind of break the business cycle. Practical, pragmatic countries have always known that things go up and they come down. And if you give people a little freedom to do some investment, they will get creative, and they'll discover new ways to make money, but they'll take it too far. So the government has to step in at some point and play referee. It's not that the government controls these markets, but they have to keep the markets from getting out of control. And what we've done since the 1980s is each time the market has gotten out of control, our response has not been to tighten up and impose some new regulation. It's been to deregulate further. You can look back to the 1980s with the deregulation of the savings and loans, and then you can look to the deregulation of banks that's taken place. So we keep giving them more slack instead of reeling them in. And as a result, the swings in the business cycle have gotten ever more extreme.
Well, Mark, the Republicans would argue, no, the problem was that the government was interfering from the get-go, okay? And maybe they'll take your argument and say, all the way back to Washington, we were doing it wrong. And that if we just completely get out of the way of business, then everything will work out.
Yeah, it's an attractive argument. It just has never worked for anyone. It's kind of like communism. It's a system that would probably work for angels. If everyone was perfect and always abided by the rules, pure capitalism, like pure communism, would work well. But human beings are involved, and that means that somebody does have to play referee.
I mean, referee is a perfect way of putting it, because you can't have a game without refs. I mean, you can have
right.
And if you've seen pickup ball here at Veteran in L.A., you'll know that. Okay, but now back to another point that you made in your diary, which was that maybe Japan's lost decade wasn't such a bad thing. That's a very unique argument. Why do you say that, Mark?
Well, it's not unique to me. I'm stealing a lot of that from economist Richard Koo, who's looked long and hard at what Japan went through. We keep hearing lost decade, like it's the boogeyman, right? We don't want to go there. But the truth is, during Japan's lost decade, their unemployment never rose to about what half of ours is at the moment, and at the same time, they were able to add additional benefits for retirees, and, by the way, not one Japanese citizen lost full, complete government-paid health care. So how lost is a decade in which no one is really suffering that much? And they didn't call on their citizens to kind of bail them out by spending over their heads. In fact, people were able to tighten up, save more money, and eventually the economy was turned around. Because Japan still understands that relationship. You can have the companies get out of hand a bit, have the government step in, and the government shoulder the burden for some period of years while the companies get their books back in order, while they get all the red ink off the books and get themselves back in good shape. And then it's time for the companies to start the next cycle. And the government obligation is to not only kind of hold up the business while they get their act back together, but to put regulations in place so that they won't repeat what just happened.
Well, Mark, I got to be honest with you. It's an argument I hadn't seen before, and I find it very interesting because I didn't know that their maximum unemployment rate they had in that quote-unquote lost decade was only 5.5%. So
Right.
if everybody's still employed and they still have health insurance, but the companies aren't making tremendous profits, and the reason they're not is because they had overinflated profits and overinflated assets before, so it makes sense that they had to deflate, then maybe it's not such a bad thing. But others would argue, Mark, that, well, then your income didn't grow very much and the economy didn't grow very much, and that's got to be a bad thing.
It depends on how you're measuring how your economy is doing. If your measurement of your economy is strictly the gross domestic product, then yeah, Japan was flat for nearly a decade. So it wasn't as if they were in what we would consider recession. They weren't going down, but they weren't growing either. However, they didn't go down. The gross domestic product for Japan never fell below where it was on the day when the government stepped in and, by the way, intentionally popped the bubble before it could get more out of hand. And in the meantime, the people were not losing their jobs, and the average income for Japan was not dropping. So in a lot of ways, they not only are doing better during their lost decade than we're doing now, they did better for the average worker in the lost decade than we did in the previous decade, which was supposed to be boom times for us.
And right now what we have is a situation with what we've done in reaction, so we didn't, quote-unquote, have a lost decade, where the bankers are back to making record profits, and we have a 10% unemployment rate, and we don't even have health insurance for all Americans. I mean, health insurance is a small part of it, but of course it's very important, but it's just to give people context. So obviously you think Geithner has gone in the completely wrong direction here. Do you think that he's reinflating the bubble?
Well, I think that it's our obligation, not just a good idea, but the obligation to step in at this point and to regulate the kind of creative financial instrument that was created over the last decade. It wouldn't hurt us one bit to back all the regulation that was removed with Glass-Steagall, which did a very good job of protecting us from exactly this kind of asset inflation for, 60 years before we removed it?
Yeah,
so,
unfortunately, the guy who helped remove it is Obama's top economic advisor, Larry Summers. So that doesn't bode well. Real quick, before we run out of time, Mark, and we're talking to Mark Sumner. He writes his DevilsTower on Daily Kos, and he wrote the piece, How Republicans Killed Capitalism. What do you think about the latest efforts by Chris Dodd and the financial regulation reform that he's put together in the Senate?
I think that it makes sense on the surface, at least, that we should have a single regulatory body. Certainly one of the problems in the last cycle was a lot of finger pointing, but each organization was willing to point at another one as being really responsible. So if we can have one place where the bank bucks stop, then perhaps we have a better chance of regulating them. But, of course, it may just be easier in that case for the banks to control what's going on if there's a single regulator. Yeah,
but is it the best of all the options we have, or do you see something in the House that might be better?
It's probably the best thing on the table right now. Certainly there have been people that have proposed bringing back Glass-Steagall and making some really strict regulatory changes, but I don't think any of those at the moment have the kind of momentum or the attention, at least, that Dodd's proposal does.
All right. Mark Sumner writes his DevilsTower on Daily Kos. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. We really appreciate it.
Watch the live show at theyoungturks.com.